So it's Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to TEDxUNB St. John 2019. We are very excited to have you all here today and hope you're just as excited as we are to hear from our 9 incredible speakers. My name is Megan Kozak, and I will be your MC today. A little brief history about me. I'm a Fredericton native and moved here about 3 years ago. I'm currently finishing my bachelor in communications and business, and I've also been a varsity athlete for the past 3 years. My goal today is to inspire you, engage you, challenge you, and entertain you, but most importantly, keep this show on time. Before we begin, we have a short TEDx video to share with you to outline the TEDx brand and why we are all here today.
From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons, and in theatres, every day people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a non-profit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication, and time that made it all possible. It's they who booked all the speakers, and the views you'll hear today are, of course, those of those speakers, not necessarily of TEDs. But we hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you'll take out. And now, on with the show.
You all hopefully received an itinerary when you arrived. Just to highlight some things, we will be having a break partway through the event, and I hear there will be some pretty good cupcakes as well. And we will also return at 4 to continue with the second part of the day. The TEDx event will also be hosting a networking reception following the talks from 6 to 8 at the St. John Ale House. This is located just across the atrium on the boardwalk. There will be appetizers provided and a cash bar. All are welcomed, and please feel free to bring some guests. We also have a few housekeeping items to take care of. If you're looking for a washroom throughout the day, they can be found across the hall. If you do need to use the washroom outside of the scheduled break time, please go between talks. Phones should be turned off or on Do Not Disturb, and please respect the speakers and others in attendance today. And don't worry, today's talks will be recorded and uploaded to both our website and the official TED website. So we ask you to not record any of the talks or take photos. As well, we are live streaming today's event, so please be mindful of this if you need to leave the theater at any time during the day. Finally, we also ask that there's no food or drink in the theater during the event. If you have any questions or concerns throughout the afternoon, please find a member of the TEDx team, and they are wearing lanyards and with event organizer on them. Throughout the day, we encourage you to engage in all our social media feed of Facebook and Instagram. Our handle is at TEDxUNB St. John, and the event hashtag is TEDxUNB St. John. All of these tools are designed to enrich your experience today. As well, throughout the day, we will be having some draws for these awesome TEDxUNB St. John mugs made by the wonderful Cuttable Creations. And we have an awesome draw happening for both a mug and a quarter zip-up TEDxUNB St. John sweater. If you have not taken the time to purchase your ticket for this, don't worry, tickets can be purchased during the break. This event would not be possible without the amazing support from all of our sponsors. They are featured on the screen as well as in your program. Without these organizers, none of this would be possible. Please thank our sponsors for their participation and support. So, without further ado, I'd ask Julia Wright from CBC New Brunswick and Dana Alexander from the TEDxUNB St. John to introduce the theme of this year's event.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. And can you hear me? Good, everyone? Well, welcome to this amazing event at the New Brunswick Museum and to TEDxUNB St. John. I'm Julia Wright, and I'm the host of Information Morning in St. John. And I have to say that CBC is so pleased to be part of this event. We're so glad to see such a crowd here today, too. It's really great to see all of you.
And I'm Dana Alexander, and I'm one of the organizers for the event today. And we'd just like to share this quote with you to begin. Tell me the facts and I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. It's a familiar quote, and it is central to what we're doing here today at TEDxUNB St. John. The power of storytelling is at the core of the partnership between CBC and TEDx. In fact, we are all storytellers. No one knows this better than those of us on the East Coast, where stories are a way of life.
It's true. In my job, we tell stories every day. And of course, everybody who's here today has a story. That's what connects us. It's not just as individuals, but as a community. And that matters because when we share our stories, we're heard, for one, and we also create understanding between one another and kind of broaden our perspectives. And it sounds corny, but that actually has the potential to make the world a better place. Okay, so today you're going to meet 9 dynamic speakers who are going to talk about everything from new inventions to whales to self-care. We have a philosopher in the house today, and also conversations about loving relationships and emotional literacy. So this is a very eclectic group of speakers, and it really captures this theme of diversity. And it's not just in the community of St. John, but it's actually right around the world. Because recently these speakers that you're going to meet today all get together at Tuck Studios right here in Uptown St. John. And they had a chance to kind of talk about who they are and get to know one another and what it means to be part of TEDx. So they discovered that they are this tremendously diverse group of people. So some of them grew up right here in St. John, others kind of just up the highway in Harvey or Florenceville, while others are from as far away as Ontario, Alberta, the US, Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and even from India. So we're going to meet some of them just now, and we're going to see what they have to say.
Talking to a couple of my friends the other day about how I was like, I'm so terrified to do this. And she said, yeah, but you've been wanting this for longer than you've been scared of this. And it kind of like, stopped and thought about that. And I was like, oh, I've wanted this for a really long time.
And it's such an important thing. Like, when you look at it from 10 years from now. Well,
and you want to nail it.
You do, and I think
wanted it. Good.
I applied because I wanted to take the challenge, but then when I got accepted, it was a different story altogether, and now I'm nervous.
You know, they asked me, it's like, are you worried about it being short? I was like, no. Short, not at all. Too long, and that's a problem, because I can go on and on.
Not only am I good enough, and not only did they choose me, but I remind myself of the reason I applied for a TEDx talk, that I want to share my passion with everybody, and that the main purpose is to spark a change in our community.
when you're under pressure sometimes, that's where your best work comes.
If somehow something happens and I fall on the stage, I'll treat it as another failure, maybe stand up again, dust myself off, and keep going.
Maybe it becomes a gift, who knows, right?
Getting to see that we have a mutual nervousness makes me feel good, because it just allows me to see that we are more ready than we think we are.
I was inspired by the theme.
Oh, were you?
Think about
Really?
my topic.
Cool.
Yeah, so it relates to the theme.
Yeah. Good for you.
Originally, like, mine didn't at all, to be honest. Like, it didn't get it, but then we just started thinking in those terms. Just putting that new framework onto it, like just looking at it from a slightly different lens of diversity was super helpful. And it actually, like, we just drew some stuff out that really was like, this is important, this is really relevant.
I've been promoting like women in STEM my whole career and trying to get more women in engineering. And so I got the first woman who has a patent in there, and I got the first woman doctor, and so then I found the first, African Canadian that got a patent. And when I looked at the theme, because I didn't really see that at first, and then I looked at it and went, I'm already kind of doing this. Thank God it fits,
And then I thought about it, I was like, well, it's me. I kind of live it. I'm diverse. I'm part of the diversity, the whole diversity idea. So it's just like whatever I put out there, just kind of, if I do it from my perspective, my vision, it'll kind of embody that theme itself, right, and what I want to do.
I want people to know that there are people in this community that care, and they care about feeding each other's ecosystem in love and in business and diversity and in school, no matter what it is. And that's what I'm hoping success is for me that evening.
So if somebody goes home after the TEDx talk and starts practicing self-care, then I'm gonna feel like my talk was successful.
I would just hope that it, like I said, it sparks people's interest, that it starts a conversation, and maybe just people see things differently. And hopefully at the end of the day, though, I'm not gonna lie, I want people to like it, though.
I think that's something that I'd really consider like a success, is like sharing my passion and knowledge with someone else and them getting something from it.
Yeah. And passion feeds passion.
Exactly, yeah.
At least
Yeah.
it gets people thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully take some action.
Okay, so that was a great taste of all the speakers that we're going to be seeing today. But I also want to know, and I know everyone here too is curious about how this all came to be. So, Dana, I have some questions for you. Why did you select this theme of diversity?
So there are a lot of reasons that we chose diversity for this year's TEDxUNB St. John. The first is that we wanted something that would relate to everybody in our audience, all of our speakers, and we wanted something that, our speakers didn't like prepare their talks around this. As you can see in the video, they were already writing their talks, and then they heard and they're like, oh, like this fits. And so that's really why we chose diversity. We want it to be all-encompassing, and we really wanted it to, hit home for a lot of people.
Right, and you've got this great roster of speakers. How did you choose them?
It was very difficult. We had over 50 applicants for our event this year. We had a great speakers team, and so everybody, everybody applied, and then we interviewed, and it was a long process, and it was very thorough. And we have 9 speakers here for you today, and we think they're going to have a really good talk to share.
Why do they matter, these talks?
Yeah. So again, I kind of hope that they matter to everybody in a different way. That everybody takes something different home with them today, and the speakers are up here. They're sharing their passion, and it matters to them, and it matters to us living in this diverse city.
And they're apparently nervous, so we have to go easy on them, you guys. Okay, thank you so much, Dana. All right, and thank you for all your hard work in organizing this event. I just have to say, when I put a story together, one of the key questions that I like to ask myself, and that my colleagues at CBC ask ourselves, is why does this matter? There are millions of stories out there. What makes an audience care about this one? So whether it is overcoming adversity, or challenging old ways of doing things, or coming up with new ways of doing things, the speakers this afternoon have one thing in common, and to me, that is kind of getting at the emotional core that is so powerful in storytelling. And what they're sharing with you today really represents that. And this doesn't happen by accident. A lot of people have worked really hard to bring you these stories. And the speakers themselves come from an incredible range of backgrounds. They have different educations, different experiences, and they really live up to the TED tagline of ideas worth sharing. Diversity shines through them, not just in who they are and where they're from, but in the journey that brought them all to the stage today. So I know that you're all really going to enjoy what you're hearing from these guys. Like I said, bear with us. And I got to say, too, that having grown up in St. John, I've witnessed a changing city. And events like this are really part of that. It's embracing diversity. It makes St. John a better place to live. And as you've just seen, the speakers today have worked really hard to polish these talks and bring their ideas to life. So 50 applications, you heard Dana say, countless hours of practicing, 6 weeks of work with the TEDx team. These 9 talks are going to be the result. So thank you so much for being here today. And remember that people are what is at the core of great storytelling and of TEDx talks as well. So we hope that these stories will connect you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia and Dana. If you weren't excited before, I hope you are now. I know the speakers have put a lot of work into preparing for today and have a lot of great ideas to share with you. So, starting us off today is Dima Abu Shaban. Dima graduated from UNBSJ in 2017 with a major in psychology and a minor in cognitive neuroscience. Mental health is her area of interest, and she's passionate about shaping a healthier community. Many of us know that practicing self-care is essential for a healthy lifestyle and reduces stress. But what many of us don't know is the role of neuroscience plays in self-care. Please welcome Dima with her talk, Retrain Your Brain with Self-Care.
I see many posts on social media about people being tired from work or from school. So let me share one of those posts with you today. Your friends who work 40+ hours a week aren't just avoiding you, they're just tired. Does this look familiar to some of you? Did you know that the World Health Organization recently recognized burnout as an occupational phenomenon? My best friend goes to the gym every morning as part of her self-care routine, until one day she suddenly stopped going. And she definitely seemed off. There was something about her energy levels. She wasn't like she used to be. So I asked her, "Are you okay?" And we all know what happens to somebody when you ask them, "Are you okay?" They will either burst into tears or they'll say, "I'm fine." Well, she said, "I'm fine." And we all know that when someone says, "I'm fine," they're really not. I'm fine means I'm frustrated. I'm upset. I want to quit my job. I want to drop out of school. I'm tired. So why is it that we are so tired? Is it because we're drained from working too much? Is it because we're overwhelmed with stress? Or is it because we spend too much time working and little to no time doing what makes us feel good? We've all had our fair share of bad days. But the most important question to ask yourself is it actually a bad day? Or is it more than that? We can prevent burnout from exposure to chronic stress by practicing self-care. But just remember that self-care is not a one-size-fits-all. For example, self-care for my husband is candles and bubble baths. For me, well, let's just say it's not that. It's easy to wake up every day and show up to work because you have to, it's your job, it's mandatory. Yet, it's just as easy to convince ourselves that we don't need self-care. I don't have the time for it. It's ineffective. Or because we think that going on vacation for a few weeks to a nice place is enough of a self-care. That's like charging your phone for 5 minutes, it reaches 20%, and you're like, yeah, I'm set for the whole day. But it's not gonna last long. So what happens when we keep coming up with excuses to delay self-care? What happens when we postpone self-care? Well, first of all, self-care increases resilience, motivation, and our ability to cope with stress. It also produces neurotransmitters that are responsible for making us feel good. Without self-care, we may experience burnout and compassion fatigue. Burnout has been described as the state of psychological, emotional, mental, physical, and even spiritual exhaustion from chronic involvement in your work. Compassion fatigue is simply the cost you pay for being too caring. It's psychological and physical fatigue from showing too much empathy to others and not enough for yourself. A Canadian psychologist named Donald Hebb once said, "Neurons that fire together wire together." Our brains are constantly changing because neurons in our brain are constantly being fired and because certain parts of our brains are more activated than others. Our brains are constantly changing simply from caffeine consumption to stress to practicing meditation. Our brains are constantly changing simply because of learning new things and forming new habits. And due to the brain's ability to change, we can shape it to a healthier one by rewiring it. And we can rewire our brain by practicing self-care. So, to start with, neuroscience is the study of the nervous system. So that includes the different regions of your brain, the neurons, and the neural connections throughout the nervous system. Neuroscience helps us understand human thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. It also helps us understand how our brain operates under certain circumstances, what happens when we're under stress, and how the brain can change itself. Let's take a look at what happens to our brains when we drink coffee. When you drink a cup of coffee, suddenly your surroundings are clear. Your attention is at its best. It couldn't get any better than that. You drink your first sip of coffee on a Monday morning and you're like, yes, let's do this Monday. I'm gonna conquer the world. Nothing can bring me down. But don't you realize that as the day goes by, your energy levels start to decrease, you get really tired, and you find yourself running for that second cup of coffee or even third cup of coffee for you coffee addicts out there? Well, that's because of a molecule called adenosine. Adenosine is a molecule that is naturally produced by your brain, which makes you tired. So when you drink a cup of coffee, the caffeine blocks adenosine's production, making you more alert. This entire process is basically changing your brain temporarily. So, when you practice self-care, you're actually wiring your brain. You're making it better. I just need a moment. Learning new things and forming new habits all start in our brain. Why do you think we have the ability to memorize the lyrics to our favorite songs? That's because of two things. First is repeated practice, and second, it's the pathway in your brain and the neurons wiring together. The brain is made up of ample neurons, and neurons are a billion of nerve cells. The neurons consist of axons, dendrites, and the cell body. The cells are very talkative, and they communicate with one another.
The axon will first send a message from one neuron onto another. And then the listening neuron, known as the dendrite, receives the signal and passes it along to the next neuron, and so on. So cells will keep firing messages in our brain. And the firing of cells and its activity is known as neural connections. Think of neural connections as best friends with a very strong bond. The closer you are to your best friend, the more supported and loved you will feel. So when you're learning the lyrics to your favorite song, the cells that send and receive information about that song become very efficient. And the more efficient they become, the less effort it takes them to send a message to the next cell about what's happening, making it easier for you to sing the song. So when you practice self-care to include it in your routine, it's as if you're learning something new. It becomes a habit. And this habit is the result of learning a new task. You can learn to practice self-care the same way that you learn anything else, through repeated practice. As we now know, your brain fires neurons all the time, which causes some changes in your brain, such as the pathway that you just created to learn the lyrics to your favorite song. Your brain is constantly trying to remodel itself based on the experiences that you go through in life. And when you stimulate the same circuit over and over again, you strengthen it. You learn to practice self-care the same way you learn anything else, through repeated practice. You may be familiar with the saying, practice makes perfect, but just keep in mind that self-care doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, and perseverance. But don't give up. Lots of little efforts add up over time. You have to work your brain the same way that you would work your muscles when you're exercising at the gym. As humans, we are more prone to being affected by negative news instead of positive ones. Somehow, our brain is wired to pay attention to the bad side of things instead of the good. This is because of something known as the negativity bias. The same way that your brain was able to create that negativity pathway, you can create a positivity pathway. And the first step is to practice self-care. The more you practice self-care, the more neurons your brain will fire in order to create that positivity pathway that will help you cope with stress. There are 4 neurotransmitters responsible for making us feel good, according to Loretta Browning: serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin. She calls them the happy chemicals. When you do something that you love, when you practice something that makes you feel good, these neurotransmitters will be released by your brain. But when you're always under stress and you're always feeling overwhelmed, these neurotransmitters are not present. Let's talk a little bit about the role of the amygdala. The amygdala is an almond-shaped region in your brain that is responsible for detecting stress. It's literally your stress radar. So when you're under stress, your amygdala is active. Your heart starts racing, your cortisol levels increase, which is a normal response to the situation that you're in. Stressing out from time to time is normal. But when your amygdala is always active, you're wiring your brain to think that you're always in a stressful situation and that there's always danger around you, even when there's none. But practicing self-care helps you manage your stress levels, which keeps your amygdala well balanced. Treat your brain the same way that you would treat your body. Why would you take care of your physical health but neglect your mental well-being? Think of it this way. Your brain is like the remote control, and your body is like the television. As long as you have charged batteries, you can flip through life's challenges with resilience. And in order to charge yourself, practicing self-care is essential. But just remember to be patient with yourself. When you create a self-care plan, when you're not in crisis, you're creating a toolkit that you can turn to in times of distress. Nobody knows you more than you know yourself. You know how stressed out you get. Use that as the guide to help you create the best self-care plan for you to prevent making stressful situations even more stressful. So to answer the question I posed earlier, what happens when we postpone self-care? We simply don't feel good. Our energy levels decrease. We feel less motivated. We don't want to do anything. We may even feel depressed, and it could be hard to get out of. Self-care enhances your energy levels, boosts your mood, increases resilience, and most importantly, reduces stress, because stress is inevitable. A healthy brain is a healthy you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dima. Although I have to admit, I'm with her husband. Bubble baths and candles are definitely my form of self-care. Next up, we have a duo talk featuring Sebastian Gomez and Sam Crete. Sebastian is a fourth-year philosophy student at the University of King's College in Halifax. He expresses a deep interest in the contemporary world and the role in which philosophy can play in our everyday life. Born in Havana City, he has lived in 3 countries, which has allowed him to be appreciative of the role that cultures and ideas have in shaping our norms and behaviors. Sam is a graduate from Renaissance College at UNB. Experiential learning is very important to him because learning through immersing yourself in the world helps you understand your place in it. It is through his experience and the experiences of philosophical counterpart Sebastian Gomez that this TED Talk came into being, and they are both very excited to share all that they have learned together. Please welcome Sebastian and Sam with the Theoretics of Love.
Today, we find ourselves in a theater, which I think is the perfect place to talk about love. Romeo, oh Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?
I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo. Ever since anyone can remember, love has been especially dramatic.
I mean, the earliest relationship I can remember was back in middle school when Sally decided to kiss Michael instead of John. And boy, let me tell you, the playground had a field day with that one.
Be it in Shakespeare or the middle school playground, the drama is inescapable. But why? Why do we care so much all the time about who is dating who?
And don't even get me started on breakups. I mean, how many of you can honestly say that you're still friends with all of your exes? Ooh, buddy, put that arm down. I talked to Sophie last week, and trust me, she's not over it.
Yikes. Just give me a second, sorry. 1 second. What's the next one? You know. No. We'll get it out. Yikes. Do you remember? Because I don't.
Love is such a tragedy on stage.
It is. It is such a tragedy.
But why?
But why? During a particularly tragic period in both of our lives, we set out to answer this very question. Why did the breakup have to be tragic at all? Did it have to be dramatic at all?
Theatricality, drama, tragedy, and love. Through our experiences, we found these 4 elements to be strongly interconnected.
My name is Sam.
And my name is Sebastian.
We'd like to talk to you about the theatricality of love.
For any good play, you need scripts for the actors to follow. Otherwise, it becomes like every project Sam and I have ever put together, an increasing series of panics before eventually making it all up on the spot of the big night.
Relationships, much in line with plays, have their own scripts going on. You can see these in the expectations that people have for each other.
Let's say a relationship is founded on the mutual admiration of the history of equestrian sport. That's right, for those of you into that sort of thing, you're still deserving of love. Now, a script that might come out of a relationship like this is that both you and your partner will attend the equestrian events whenever they occur.
But one day, Bob is caught going to a pony show with Terry, and it feels like a betrayal. See, relationships come in all shapes and all sizes, but they all carry their basic tenets. What is the goal of the partnership? What are the parameters under which it exists? What do you want out of the person that you love most?
As fun as they might be, monologues tend to drag on and on and on and on and on and on. That's why we've found that performances are best done in partnerships.
See, relationship scripts are always done in relation to your partner. They're what you expect your lover to be. However, these expectations can easily go unfulfilled. You may find yourself disappointed when they don't play out the particular script you had in mind.
A jarring example of this is when we forget an anniversary. This sucks because we feel out of sync with our partner. They're not playing out the scripts according to how we wanted them to.
A more devastating example is when expectations are completely unarticulated. Say you get married only to have a conversation about having children later, where one partner wants to have kids while the other does not. That's a devastating blow for the entire relationship because the scripts are completely out of alignment.
Lastly, performances are always done within the context of an audience. Now, when we say audience, we're referring to family, friends, coworkers, movies, and music, all of the things which pressure us to act in a certain way.
From media to your family, one gains a sense of what your relationship should be.
A typical standard Western script is that when you propose marriage, you should do something like, I don't know, get down on one knee, pull out a ring, and say something casual like, Samuel Crett, will you make me the happiest man on earth?
Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes! When you think about it, engagement rings make absolutely no sense. So, when you think about it, what does that have to do with saying, I want to spend the rest of my life with you? You could just as easily propose with a tiny little tree sapling that will grow symbolically alongside your marriage.
Aww.
That sounds great, but even if you do it, your partner will be quick to point out that you used heartfelt symbolism to get out of buying a ring, and you're just a cheapskate.
Money doesn't grow on trees, after all.
Now we have our 4 components. You as an actor, reading a script in the context of another actor, in the context of an audience.
These 4 components can help us understand relationships, but they're also crucial in our understanding of drama. Now here, drama refers to what is life-affirming about your relationship. This can be the very intense feelings you get when you know your relationship is playing out to its truest form.
Like everything else, drama begins with relationship scripts. Drama it's very important to you. It makes you feel like you're getting what you need. For example, the scripts that you have in your relationship are much more dramatic than others. Say you kiss your partner before they go to work. That's one thing. But kissing your lover in the pouring rain at midnight, the night before they leave you forever to pursue their life's true passions, that's a bit more dramatic. It has that je ne sais quoi.
Your partner, of course, is also crucial in the development of drama, because it doesn't matter how dramatic your scripts are if you can't rely on your partner to play them out with you.
Your internalized audience also plays a factor. It's the pressure you feel to do the dramatic. When you do dramatic things in your relationships, your internalized audience roars with applause.
We strive for the dramatic within our relationships because we want them to feel as big as possible. So big, in fact, that we'll often break cognitive consistency in order to do so.
We live in a secular world, where our approach to explaining the world around us is typically immanent and secular. What that means is you typically wouldn't look to the supernatural to explain the world around you.
Let's say you're walking by a wall and you see a little gecko stuck to it. Now you might take the guy, look at its sticky paws, and try to figure out why that substance is sticking to the surface at all. This is much like a microscope where we zoom into the smaller parts in order to understand.
This approach certainly exists with relationships, Biochemists can look at the chemicals going on in your brain when you gaze at your lover in order to explain why it's happening. Psychologists can look at your previous traumas in order to explain why you love who you love. These approaches certainly exist, but they may feel as if they reduce the relationship in size, like just to one or two things.
Oh, you just love him because he gives you a dopamine rush. Or, oh, you just love him because he reminds you of your father. These explanations are certainly out there, but you might not find them so enchanting.
But love is different. With love, we're willing to seek out a supernatural explanation. Oh, we're so great together. It must have been fate. There's no other explanation. Some force must have put us together. With love, we understand by zooming out. This gives your relationship a bigger sense of scale. It seems bigger, it seems grander, it seems more dramatic.
We're much more comfortable with the supernatural explanation when it comes to love because we want it to be as dramatic as possible, even if we don't use that explanation in the rest of our lives.
As much as we strive for the dramatic, not all of it's good.
Let's take something that we've all heard once or twice, that somewhere out there for me and for you, and yes, even for you, is the one.
The one refers to the idea that there's one person for you, one perfect individual that will meet all of your expectations. However, this is certainly not the case. Say, for example, you think, oh, when I find the one, they'll sing this song for us at our wedding. They'll just know it's my favorite. I won't even need to mention it to them because they're so perfect.
In this circumstance, one actor is expecting their scripts to play out a certain way. They expect their partner to play them out harmoniously and without effort.
This is a doomed approach since it denies the diversity found in life. Having rigid expectations robs you of the reality of the other person. There is a fullness there, much more than just the scripts that you want them to play out.
Getting rid of these rigid expectations liberates you to create a play in harmony with your partner.
Go through this process, ask questions, make your lover the one, rather than passively waiting for them to occur in your life.
While this might be the ideal, we tend to fall into compensation when we feel a script has run its course. We use compensation as a crutch when we know a script is starting to die. Let's look at a script.
Say Chris and Alex are in a relationship, and Chris has been making less of an effort to iron his own shirts and has been relying on Alex to pick up the slack. Alex is most certainly disappointed with this development in the relationship. This disappointment comes from the fact that it becomes very obvious that you're playing out someone else's script with no guarantee that they are playing out yours.
While one actor is feeling their script start to die, they may rationalize the relationship by looking at the other scripts available. Sure, Chris is taking advantage of Alex's hospitality, but he has been buying them chocolate milk once a week, every week for the past 20 years, even though he hates the taste of it, just because he knows his partner loves it so much.
When scripts fail, the most important scripts reveal themselves. Not every script you have can be played out. What you must do is find the most critical ones to make sure that they are in alignment. Trivial things like whether you match your partner at a Halloween party can be completely disregarded. But bigger questions like, what role do I play in your life? These are too big to go unaddressed.
The importance of understanding the scripts that you have is precisely so that you don't play out an imaginary love life.
Rather, you should feel as if your love is a personal one because it follows exactly what you want, rather than the tired tropes played out around you.
The power of love is to show you how diverse the scripts around you are.
At the end of the day, all scripts came from previous people feeling the same way in their own time.
This means that you too can add to the aggregate idea of love and make your own path something special.
Get to know your relationships. Look at your scripts so that you can become the director of your love life rather than the passive actor.
Make your lover the one and show us how diverse your love can be.
Love as Theater is a creative endeavor where you can demonstrate your passion,
originality,
creativity,
and honesty.
Thank you. We love you.
Thank you, Sebastian and Sam. And personally, as a horseback rider, I'm glad you guys think I'm still deserving of love. One of the few requirements by TED to host a TEDx event is to show a short video of all the 1,000+ incredible TED videos posted on their website, TED.com. Our first one is Why 20 is Not the New 30. Clinical psychologist Meg Jay has bold message for 20-somethings. Contrary to popular belief, your 20s are not a throwaway decade. She gives 3 pieces of advice for how 20-somethings can reclaim adulthood in the defining decade of their lives. That talk certainly had a lot of valuable lessons, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come with many of our other speakers today. But before we introduce our next speaker, we are going to give away our first mug of the day. So you all had the chance to enter your name into the box when you arrived, and we're going to pick some of the prizes right now. So the first winner today is Krista Wood. So if you want to come up and get your mug. Okay, so let's keep rolling. Imagine traveling across the world to step into a new, unfamiliar place where no one knows you or has grown up like you. Imagine crossing paths with them, first as strangers, then slowly and steadily as friends. Then as extended family who will help sustain you when you navigate the twisted roads of life. Please welcome Dahlia Daz with A World Beyond Your Own.
10 years ago, September 2009, I had my bags packed. I was ready to leave my home country, India, alone for the first time, to travel halfway across the world to Canada, this large country where I knew no one. As the plane flew over St. John, I looked down in anticipation at my new home and saw some trees. I kept looking and saw more trees, even more trees. At this point, the voice inside my head started to panic. Where are all the people? I come from a city of 14 million people. I'm used to seeing people everywhere. But where are they? Where are the buildings? This University of New Brunswick St. John, does it even exist? What am I going to do? Thankfully, UNB St. John does exist. So does our city. And 10 years later, I can tell my terrified young self what I did. I went to school. I discovered this new place where the buildings, the trees, the roads all looked different. I had the most serene view from my university residence, a river flowing by. This was a place where in the fall, the leaves would turn these beautiful, bright shades of color and then disappear. And it got cold, really cold. From temperatures of 40 degrees in summer, I was now experiencing negative 30 in the winter. And I saw my first snowfall. In my excitement, I ran out of my residence room in my pajamas and picked up a handful of snow. It was so white and wonderful until my hand almost froze. And back I ran into the heat of my room. And I learned a few things. I learned that if you're asking somebody when they graduated, you shouldn't say, "When did you pass out?" Because that makes them think about that night that they never want to think about. I learned that if somebody's asking you for a loonie, you simply hand them a coin. They are not looking for a lunatic. I also learned that in Canada, A is not always followed by B, because sometimes it's just used to end our sentences, eh? And I had the most amazing local experiences. I went out into the woods to see how maple syrup is made from the sap of maple trees. I made my first snow angel. I had an experience of skiing and snowshoeing. Well, the skiing terrified me, but at least I tried. I made candles before Advent with my friends. I went to the church to see the midnight mass right before Christmas. I tried Irish set dancing and ate my share of poutine. But there was more. Here in St. John, I was able to decorate eggshells in Ukrainian style. I went to my first ever Arabic ladies' party and a Korean gathering and a Chinese harvest festival, Afro night celebrations, a Persian Nowruz dinner. I was able to see Vietnamese hand dancing. I tried learning the salsa. I went to my first ever iftar dinner during Ramadan. I was having Syrian delicacies. I was drinking Turkish coffee with Filipino desserts. I was having experiences from all over the world, right in our little city. I realized very quickly that this was special. And it was possible because of all of the people living here who were contributing to this place with their own cultures. I understood then why I loved St. John and my life in Canada so much. Of course, it was warm, not in terms of the weather, but of people's hearts. It was welcoming, it was beautiful. But in its diversity, it presented to me a true little picture of the world. What I could have experienced spending endless months and dollars in travel, I was experiencing right here in this place I called home. I decided to give back with what I had to give. I helped organize multicultural events, Indian festivals, Dasera, Diwali, Holi. I did ethnic dances at community events. I taught kids how to dance. I watched and delivered presentations about cultural diversity, about India. I was trying to weave my own little piece into this remarkable tapestry of culture, of ethnicity, of tradition. This opportunity to see how other people, not only how they dress, how they eat and celebrate festivals, but how they see and do and think about things, what they believe in, how they live their lives. This, to me, was incredibly valuable. I was able to see things from wider perspectives than I had ever been exposed to before. And it got me thinking, how easy is it for people who are so different from each other to live together, to work together, to learn from each other, to truly absorb the diversity of this place and thrive in it? It brought me back to my experiences at UNB St. John. In my class, in the MBA program, we had students from 15 countries, and I remembered the conflict that we often had while working on our group projects together. It was not that any of us was wrong, it was just that we were seeing things totally differently. It was frustrating at the time, but now with exposure, I can see that it's just because our brains work differently. And it has a lot to do with the variety of the experiences and backgrounds that we have. Fortunately, at the time, we were able to agree to disagree on certain points while still having respect for each other and focus on our one common goal, the group project, and each do our different parts to complete the work as a team. On a larger scale, isn't that what is happening here in our city? Or, for that matter, any small but diverse community across Canada or across the world? As the world becomes more and more connected, more people are willing to travel, to move, to live in places totally different from where they were born or where they grew up. It's already started here, and as the years pass by, we will see more and more people coming in from different corners of the globe to do different kinds of work in our city. And we're bound to have our differences. But as we exchange more of our culture and our lives with each other, our eyes and minds are opened. And even if we don't totally agree with each other, we at least have the perspectives to understand each other and work towards a common goal, to help our city thrive, to make it a better place for us to live in and for our children to grow up in. But what constitutes this cultural diversity? How do we get that exposure? And how do we arrive at that mindset shift? Is it just by greeting each other on the fly, meeting once in a while, maybe attending an event or two, and then running back into the comfort of our close friend circle who are maybe from the same ethnicity, the same country? Is it just that? In my opinion, that's not enough. But unfortunately, it is the scenario in almost all the large cities, which are also large, diverse cultural centers. In these large cities, there are so many people from the same ethnicity that they tend to stick together in groups. and work in silos, forming these self-created social pockets where they mingle only among each other, speak their native language, and dress up in their own ethnic clothes and cook their own food, and it is pertaining to the country they are from, or in cases of large countries like India, the specific region of that country that they're from. In other words, they're creating a home away from home for themselves, which is great for new people coming in to be able to dive into those familiar comfort zones and get the help they need to settle in as they find their feet in a new place. But if we choose to exist solely within the confines of that social boundary, we are losing out on the opportunity to tap into the immense potential that the diversity of our city and our country has to offer us. And I laugh at myself too, because if I were living in one of those mega cities, those cultural melting pots, there's a high chance that after 10 years, about 90% of my friends would have been not only from India, but from Bengal, the specific region in India that I come from. And here's where, apart from faster commute times and lower rents, life in St. John really offers value. We are still small enough in numbers. We are still personal enough to be able to know and understand each other, to form those relationships which are deeper than just on the surface, to have interactions that go beyond the customary small talk, the work, the weekend, and the weather. We have and should spend the time to laugh, cry, eat, cook, and celebrate together, to experience in some way what life is like in each other's shoes. So next time, don't just eat the jollof rice. Get the recipe from your Nigerian friend and try making it. Don't just watch Bollywood dancing from a distance. Put on some ethnic clothes and join in. Try to learn a new sport, maybe cricket. Try to learn a new language if possible. And hey, you may fail, just like I did at skiing, but at least you now know what it feels like to do that activity. So here we are. As new residents, we know we have to be open to all these opportunities, these experiences with interest and eagerness. But in our urge to fit in, should we lose who we already are? No, because this would be a disservice not only to ourselves, but to our new home. And here's where the balance becomes really crucial. While we open our minds and hearts to the new, we should proudly retain who we are and add in our own unique piece to the rich cultural spectrum that's growing and taking shape in our community. While we embrace and learn from our new surroundings, it's important to carefully retain and preserve what we have brought within us and share that with our community. So yes, cook your own ethnic food. Dress up in your own clothes. Teach your children your native language. Please teach them the values that were passed down to you by your parents. It is only when we can truly be ourselves in a place can we make that place our home, make it our own, and build a future there. And for this to succeed, to bridge the gap, both sides have to be involved. People on both sides of this timeline, those who have been here for long and those who are coming in now, there is a need to throw away all bias and judgment. This involves being curious, getting rid of all preconceived assumptions, and having open discussions. So yes, ask me what this red dot on my forehead is about. Ask our Muslim friends why they wear the hijab, our Sikh friends the turban. Ask them why they believe in certain things, why they follow certain rituals, eat or avoid certain foods. And my friends, be okay with being asked these things. Please don't be offended, because this is the only way a real conversation can start and the floodgates can be opened for mutual thought exchange and a better understanding among all. Equally important is getting rid of our age-old habits and our comfort zones. For long-timers, this might involve being open to have new people who are very different from us into and accept them into not only our neighborhoods, but into our homes and our lives. This is typically easier to do as children. When we're young or going to school, we see our kids do this naturally without even thinking. It gets harder when we're older, when we're working and life has settled into a definite routine. We already have all the friends we need and we don't have any more time or room for more. This is when it needs to be more of a conscious choice, made again and again until it becomes a habit. It is often kindness and charity that we offer when new people come in to help them get settled. And that is, of course, a necessary first step. But our role goes beyond helping people finding an apartment or help them find a job. Let's open up a little bit further and have a true exchange. Let's tap into what they have to offer us too. Next time, invite your new friends over, maybe for Christmas dinner or for Thanksgiving dinner, and explain to them what it's about and let them be part of it as your extended family. You may be amazed at the impact this creates in not only their lives, but yours. Because in the end, it's all about the people. Those people who I couldn't find at first glance. I'm glad to say that in these 10 years, I've found some. I found more than I could have hoped to find, and they have touched, added more meaning into my life than I could have ever imagined. And for those who will be coming in new, perhaps from far away, just like I did, perhaps you're feeling a little bit uncertain, maybe lonely, looking for new friends. Don't despair if you don't see them all at first glance. Dig a bit deeper. Look just beneath the surface. Reach out, and you'll find other arms, outstretched, ready to embrace you. You may have left behind the life that you had always known, but right here, you're ready to discover a new world of your own. Namaste.
Thank you, Dahlia. Although I only came from Fredericton and not India, I do have to admit I love this little city too. Next up is Nazir. Nazir feels that authentic connection, emotional literacy, and persistent vulnerability is the key to true happiness for us all. Having been blessed with a unique perspective and the ability to express his vision, he thrives on open and honest connection for true understanding. Please welcome Nazir with Feel Like a Man.
I'm scared. I am. I'm scared often, actually. And I know I'm not supposed to be. That goes against everything I'm supposed to be as a man. I'm supposed to be cool, calm, and collected in all situations. Or angry. Angry works too. And I've been to like 3 anger management classes, so I'm pretty comfortable with anger. But scared? No. Scared is weak, and nobody wants a weak man. I mean, we've all subscribed to the archaic idea of masculinity. We're not allowed to be weak. We're not allowed to be scared. We're not allowed to ask for help. We're not even allowed to reach out to others. That can be labeled as weakness as well. We're not allowed to be emotional, and if you are, you gotta hide it, or else everybody else will know you're defective. When I was a kid, young kid, my mother used to tell me I was gonna be a good man, and I was gonna make somebody a great husband. That's nice. Nice of her to say. Scared me to death, though. I didn't know what that meant. What was I supposed to do with that? I've had that conversation with her lately, now that I'm older, and she's just described that what that was supposed to mean was that the things that I displayed at a young age would age well. And when I got older, of age, they would make me a good man. But that's not what I heard. What I heard was pressure. How am I supposed to do this? I got to be a man, which is something that I felt I had to earn, that I didn't grow into. But now I had to be a good one and a great husband. How was I going to learn to do that? I could go to my father, but I never really felt like he liked me much. I don't know why. Maybe I cried too much. Maybe I wasn't tough enough. Maybe I was too smart. Maybe I didn't play enough sports. I don't know. I just knew I was broken, and I had to fix it somehow. So maybe I can go to my friends. And I tried it. They were just about as lost as I was, though. That didn't work. TV? Aside from the Gillette commercial here or there, it's not a good idea. Society was telling me that in order to be a good man, I had to attain these attributes when I got older. I had to make money. I had to be stronger, faster, smarter than everybody. Had to know all the answers. That all the women had to like me. But mainly, most importantly, all those emotions you feel, don't. I know they're a part of you, but they shouldn't be. And if they are, there's something wrong with you. At a young age, I was already feeling the pressures of the man box. And as I got older and went through life, it would just pull me in tighter and tighter. So, what was I going to do? Dr. Judy Chu of Stanford University, in her book, When Boys Become Boys, she noted that at the age at preschool, young boys were already exemplifying the social isolation and emotional isolation that society put upon them. At preschool, how are we getting it that early already? Well, studies show that we're all complicit. In one study done with adults and infants, adults watched infants play with the Jack-in-the-Box toy. As the infants played, the adults were more likely to describe the infant as being angry if they thought it was a boy, regardless of whether it was actually a boy or not. In another study done with women, young mothers, and their young children, they found that conversations between the mother and a daughter was filled with extensive emotional vocabulary. I mean, they talked about all types of emotions. But with their sons, it centered around one thing: anger. So it was pretty much set in stone. Society had decided, I'm not supposed to be emotional, and it was early. I'm supposed to pack it away, push through it, and that's what I was going to do. That's the way to success. So, that's what I tried. But we all know that's not right. We're all supposed to experience a large spectrum of emotions. That's what we've been given from the beginning. But us as men, we're not supposed to feel a lot of these. We can't be confused, submissive. We're not allowed to be depressed, ashamed. Really, most of the sad side and the scared side is off limits to us. We know, mad, that's okay. Even if you look at the positive emotions, nurturing, serene, that stuff doesn't really apply to us. You know, when I was young, I thought manhood was this club that I had to earn my right into, that my masculinity was defined by these points that I had to earn. I didn't know how at all, but I just knew I wasn't there yet. So that's what I was going to try and do. On top of that, I was an African American growing up in the southern U.S. So that is all whole nother set of problems. I mean, I was statistically more likely to be incarcerated by now than be on the stage talking to you. And being a minority, I had to deal with this thing called marginalized masculinity, which is a fancy way of saying that I have to try 10 times harder to be as masculine as the majority in order to be taken and looked at on the same level playing field. Great. So now there's this thing I don't even know how to be, but I have to be 10 times better at it than everybody else. Okay. So I tried. I did everything. I played sports, joined the Navy. I had a bunch of different training. I had a bunch of different jobs. I'm married twice. And all for this external validation that I was looking for. I wanted to be the man that my mom said I was going to be, that my dad would acknowledge, that everybody would recognize. But that's not what happened. I was young, I didn't know how to connect with people, and my marriage just crumbled. 2 marriages, 2 divorces. And I was still a failure. So I did what I knew how to do. I buckled down, I ignored those emotions, and I pushed forward. And I turned myself into this guy. Women like this guy. Modeling opportunities, acting opportunities, they came with this guy too. And it looked like, from the outside looking in, I was getting it. I was making it. I was becoming that man I was supposed to be. But internally, I was horrified. I thought I was one meeting away from everybody finding out that I was a fraud, that I still wasn't the man I was supposed to be, and that I would lose it just like that. I remember in the middle of everything, it was about 2:30 a.m. I woke up in a panic. I didn't know what to do. I picked up my phone. I ended up calling my cousin. She answered, and I just told her, man, I'm so lonely. I feel like I have a phone full of people, but nobody to talk to. Nobody is actually interested in who I actually am as a person. If they knew that, they'd leave me. She calmed me down. We talked our way through it, and I hung up. But that's where my mindset was. I'm just meant to be alone. Nobody can know the real me, or else I wouldn't have anything. And that's how I lived my life. Until one day, I ran into the woman who's now my fiance. And I know when I saw her, she was special. I decided then I was going to try everything I could do. I was just going to share myself with her, the best that I knew how. I was going to let her know more things than anybody else knew about me. But I didn't understand how much I was ingrained. The social construct was inside of me hard. And as the years went by, the fear grew. I knew that she knew more about me than anybody else did. But it just made me more and more scared. I felt more and more like the other shoe was going to drop eventually. The pressure was built. I had to be this man she wanted me to be. But how I was going to do that? I didn't know how to be that. And I had to be this man for her that I needed to be. I had this idea that the manhood was flawless. And I had so many flaws. I had to hide. And I couldn't do it anymore. So as it started to build up, and I felt like I was going to lose it all, like I usually did, I got scared. But this time it was different. Instead of pulling away like I usually did and letting it all go, I talked to her. And I talked a lot. I told her everything I was feeling about the pressures of being a man that my mom put on me, that I didn't think I was going to get it, that I wasn't worthy of her, that I was scared I was going to lose her, that nobody even liked me for me. It went deeper. I felt like nobody ever really loved me for me. I felt like the only reason people were with me was because they were in love with the potential I had, the man I was supposed to be, the man I was supposed to become, and I wasn't that. And when they got tired of waiting, they would leave me like everybody else would. And I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. She looked at me. She had been tearing up the whole time, but the tears stopped. She looked at me with a straight face, right in my eyes, and she said, "That's stupid. I love you for you right now." And that changed everything. If she loved me for me right now, well, then I'll stop hiding. I'll let her in on everything that I have. And that's what I did. I let her in completely. I shared everything I had with her. I was more deliberate with her. I told her, look, in the middle of the day, I would just say, hey, I'm frustrated about finances right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I just want to make sure we can cover the bills. And she'd respond in a scared way, okay, me too. Because she wasn't used to it. She wanted me to be cool, calm, and collected. She was used to that rock, and I wasn't that for her at the time. But then she found out that when we shared the same emotion, we could talk about the same emotion. And when we talked about it, we could build on it. And when we built on it, we could connect. And then we were closer than we ever been before. And that's what we needed. I started to practice that with everybody. And when I practiced that, I started to find out that there was no external key to being emotional. I started to find out that that's what I had been looking for the entire time. That emotional vulnerability allowed me to present myself to the world in a way that I couldn't before. That actually, that level of manliness that I was trying to achieve, that was the first time that I felt it. Albert Hubbard, an American writer, once said that the stronger a man is, Albert Hubbard once said that the stronger a man is, the more gentle he can afford to be. And he was right, because we thought being a man meant being strong, and being strong meant not showing your emotions. But actually, being strong means being man enough to share them. And that's what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasir. Wow, haven't our first 4 speakers been amazing? At this time, yeah, we'll give them a big round of applause. But at this time, we are actually going to take our break now. So please help yourself to the snacks out in just outside the theater and have your bathroom break if you need it. And we will be back at 4. So, welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well and everyone got a cupcake, and I hope I have no frosting on my face because I had 4. So, to start off the second portion of the day, we are going to have a very exciting talk for you. Jill Corey is entering her final year of marine biology degree at UNB. She's loved water from a very young age and could often be found swimming, snorkeling, or chasing fish in the lake outside her house. Jill has taken part in internships all around the world to pursue her passion of marine biology. Please welcome my dearest friend, Jill Corey, with the Giants of Our World.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Jill, and I'm a marine biology student here at UNB in St. John. And while I've been studying here, I've actually fallen in love, and I'd really like to introduce you guys to them. They are amazing. They're charismatic, gentle, intelligent. They're a world traveler, and they're huge. I'm talking 150,000 kilograms. I'm talking about whales, of course, who have grown to be some of my favorite animals on the entire planet. They range in size from 4.5 feet to larger than any dinosaur that roamed the earth at 109. Not only are they some of the largest animals that ever existed, they're also some of the loudest. The blue whale's calls can be heard up to 1,000 miles away from where they were originally made. Entire populations of male humpbacks sing songs that are complex, last up to 30 minutes, and change ever so slightly every single year, depending on where that whale went. There's some species of whale that they believe can live up to or over 200 years of age. And one particular species, the Culver's beaked whale, can dive to a depth of 2,992 meters for 2 hours. That's insane. All in all, they're pretty cool animals. These videos you see playing right here are of humpback whales off the eastern coast of Australia. They're provided by Humpbacks in High Rises, a non-for-profit organization working to collect behavioral data on marine mammals, which is then transcribed into scientific data and used for marine conservation. Now, I actually had the pleasure to intern at Humpbacks in High Rises earlier this summer, and working so closely with these amazing animals really solidified my love for them and made me want to protect them even more than I already did. But Australia is pretty far away, so if you're not convinced just yet, let me bring it a little bit closer to home for you guys and introduce you to someone who spends their summers just about an hour away from here in the Bay of Fundy. This is Sedge. Sedge is a humpback whale that's frequented the Bay of Fundy for a couple years now. He's our most easily identifiable whale. You can see he's got a big chunk of his dorsal missing. He's also my personal favorite whale. Now that I've introduced you to these amazing animals, you're probably thinking, okay, why do I care? As it turns out, these whales that we don't often see because they live in the deep seas actually have a huge role in our lives. In the words of marine biologist and whale conservationist Asha DeVos, these animals that we see as charismatic, beautiful creatures are actually vital ecosystem engineers. They play a large aid in the maintenance, stability, and health of our oceans, and through that, provide services to us as humans. Now, they provide these services one of 2 ways: through their fecal matter or their rotting carcasses. Yum, right? Throughout a whale's life, they dive to deep waters to feed and then come to the surface layers to breathe. While doing so, they release enormous fecal plumes, known as whale pumps. These whale pumps contain essential limiting nutrients like iron and nitrogen that can't often be found at the surface layers. Being brought here, they stimulate the growth of phytoplankton, microscopic marine organisms that are photosynthetic. Now, phytoplankton are the base of every single marine food chain. And not only that, but scientists estimate that roughly 70% of our world's oxygen comes from marine plants like phytoplankton. So more whale poop means better animals, more healthier ecosystems, and more air for us to breathe. These whales are also responsible for nutrient cycling over long horizontal distances. The humpback whale travels 16,000 or more kilometers every single season, traveling from their colder feeding waters to their calving waters and then back again. There was one gray whale, a female, who was tagged off the coast of Russia, traveling all the way down to the coast of Mexico, staying for a couple hours, and then turning around and heading right back. That's 22,000 kilometers in a single trip. That's crazy. Even after their death, these whales are helpful to us. You see, when a whale dies, its carcass sinks. This is what's known as a whale fall. These whale falls can provide nutrients and shelter for hundreds of deep sea species, like the deep sea cucumber, the thorny head fish, and the sea anemone that you see here. Without these whale falls, these species that are dependent and specialized for them could die out before we even know about them, and who knows how that would affect our ecosystem. But more importantly than that, when these whales sink, they act as transport for carbon that is in our atmosphere. They take it to the deep waters of the ocean, known as carbon sinks. In a typical 40-ton carcass, there's 2 metric tons of carbon, and there can be over 8.2 metric tons in larger carcasses. A research study was done at the University of Maine in 2010 that looked at the effect that whaling would have on our carbon output. Andrew Pershing said after this that the 1 century of whaling is equivalent to the burning of 70 million acres of forest, or letting 28,000 SUVs run for 100 years straight. It's a lot of carbon. These whales are an integral part of our marine ecosystem, and in turn, our terrestrial environment. Without them, more carbon gas would be released in the atmosphere than already is being. But why is that a bad thing? I am so glad you guys asked. I'd now like to introduce you to the second giant of our world. This one, a lot scarier than our whales. Climate change. I know. Climate change is something we're all at least vaguely familiar with. It's a pretty big buzzword right about now. But what exactly is climate change? Climate change is defined as the change of long-term weather patterns. The most familiar you may be with this is the term global warming. So to explain how it happens quite simply, the Earth has its atmosphere around us that acts as a thin cloth. It's what keeps the Earth livable. And when the sun shines its rays down, most of that gets bounced back into outer space. But a portion of that gets trapped underneath this thin cloth. Now, this is a good thing. This is our layer of insulation. It's what keeps us from being more than just a frozen rock hurling through space. But we as humans alter the composition of this atmosphere every single day by burning fossil fuels like oils and gases, which releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, like carbon dioxide. These greenhouse gases build up underneath our atmosphere, and instead of it acting like a thin cloth, it's now acting as a thick, heat-trapping blanket. This has resulted in a general heating and warming trend of the surface of the Earth, both on land and in sea. Since the year 1900, the Earth's global temperature has risen by almost a full degree Celsius. So what does that mean for our oceans? And what does that mean for us? Our oceans play a much larger role in our life than many of us realize. They cover 2/3 of our entire planet. They're the driving force behind our weather patterns. They moderate our climate, and they provide us with millions of job opportunities. To date, the ocean has taken in 25%, a full quarter of all the carbon dioxide we've emitted into the atmosphere. I mentioned carbon sinks earlier. Carbon sinks work to trap and hold carbon to keep it out of the atmosphere. The ocean's been doing a pretty great job of this, but we keep pumping out more and more and more of this gas, and it's dissolving into our oceans and changing their chemistry. Now, luckily for all of you here today, I don't have time to get into the nitty-gritty details of the chemistry, but what you need to know is that more carbon dioxide in the water means we have a lower pH. That means we have more acidic oceans. This process is known as ocean acidification. Climate change's equally as evil twin brother. Climate change has been a focus of scientists for well over 2 decades now. If you look at this time series I have displayed here, the topmost purple line is the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere as a direct result of human activities. Just below it, the darker blue line shows a steady increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the surface levels of the seawater. You can see that it's increasing at a very similar rate as the line just below it is decreasing. That would be our seawater's pH. Lower pH can affect us all the way up the food chain. Smaller invertebrates like crabs, pseudopodia, mussels rely on ions in the water to form their shells and their homes, which they can't live without. This change in pH is making those ions less available. But ocean acidification isn't the only thing happening in our oceans as a direct result of climate change. Extreme changes in global temperature have been observed worldwide, and this is seeing a change in distribution and migration of species. A prime example of this, the North Atlantic right whale. At one point, Cape Cod Bay was so full of right whales, you could walk from one side of the bay to the other just by stepping on their backs. Now, their numbers are somewhere between 300 and 400. They were one of the main victims of whaling, earning their name the right whale because they were the right whale to hunt. But now these already endangered animals are facing a new threat, climate change. This change in temperature has resulted in a shift of location of their food, small schooling fish and krill. And similar to the way that we follow the scent of freshly baked cookies or pies to the kitchen, these guys follow their food, taking them into literal, unfamiliar waters. In these foreign waters, these already endangered species are more susceptible to potential threats, like ship strikes and entanglement. A change in pH and temperature will result in a change of species distribution and migration of all species that manage to survive this mass extinction we're in right now. The oceans are huge to us. They're so important. We rely on them for everything, from the food we eat, our weather patterns, to the jobs we work, and all the way up to the air that we breathe. You'd think we'd treat it a little bit better than we have been. Ocean acidity right now has increased by 26%. That's an acidification rate 10 times faster than anything we've seen in the last 55 million years. The last time something even slightly similar to this happened, it coincided with a mass extinction event, which is where we're at right now. These two things that I've introduced to you today are both massive entities that have a huge impact on our lives, but they're easy to forget about while you're going about your day-to-day tasks. You're not thinking about the whales while you chop your vegetables for Taco Tuesday, and you're not thinking about climate change while you're waiting for your new favorite Netflix show to load. Instead, we forget about them. But forgetting about these massive entities goes hand in hand with forgetting about the little things that we do every single day that affects them. Little things like grabbing an extra plastic bag when you don't need one, using any reusable cups but not using them enough. Instead, we use these plastic-lined Tim Hortons cups and toss them out every single morning. I love these oceans. I love these whales, and I want my children and their children to have a chance to fall in love with them. If we don't do something to stop our destructive ways now, not only will they not have the chance to fall in love with the oceans, I fear they won't even have the chance to call planet Earth home. I urge you today to think about things twice. Think about that plastic cup that you're using. Think about that plastic water bottle in the store. Think about it floating in the ocean. About the cigarette butts tossing out your window as you fly down the highway. About the fast fashion you're buying that's not going to last. Think about all these things that you're doing to affect our climate change and our ocean acidity. When you leave here today, I hope you keep thinking about the whales. You keep thinking about climate change. And you keep thinking that there's things that you can do, and the person sitting next to you can do, and the person next to them. If we keep thinking about these little changes that every single one of us make, it will remind us that we can make a difference. And all these little things, when done enough by enough people and often enough, have the power to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. So I actually was a shark lover, but I think she might have just converted me. So, up next, I can guarantee this next talk is going to challenge your knowledge of Canadian history. From a lifelong passion for Canadian inventors and technology, Professor Mark Rector has been inspiring his college students for 18 years with his tales of great Canadian inventors. He now speaks across the country and writes about the endless Canadian inventions. Please welcome Mark Rector with Oh Canada, Our Home and Innovative Land.
Hello? Hello? Oh, sorry. It's my other cell phone. It's my BlackBerry. It's my mom. Sorry about that. Maybe we'll just let that go to voicemail. All right, so what do these two devices, a telephone and a BlackBerry, have in common besides being telephones? Anybody? Oh, we got a smart class here. Well, let me make it a little more difficult. What do these two devices have in common? The Wonder Bra and the jockstrap. And unfortunately, my slides have jumped ahead of me. Any ideas? Well, if you said Canadian inventions for those two as well, you'd be correct. Well, good morning, class. I am Professor Mark Rector, and I have been studying the history of Canadian inventions for about 18 years now. And I actually wrote a book called Oh Canada, Our Home and Inventive Land, with the stories of numerous Canadian inventions, and they're very, very inspiring stories. So I'm going to start today's class with a pop quiz. Can anybody name either of these two very accomplished Canadians? Nobody? Class, you're going to have to study a little bit harder. Let me introduce you to Matthew Evans and Owen Maynard. Now, Owen Maynard actually designed the lunar lander for the Apollo missions. Yeah, that's right. Without him, NASA wouldn't have had a leg to stand on. And I managed to find, by digging deep in the NASA archives, the unphotoshopped original of this famous iconic photograph of Neil Armstrong and the lunar lander on the moon's surface. This is the version NASA did not want you to see. And Matthew Evans, well, he actually invented the light bulb. Yes, it's a Canadian invention. Matthew Evans and Henry Woodward invented the light bulb at the Morrison Brass Company in downtown Toronto in July of 1874. And there is the actual Canadian Patent Office record from 1874, August 3rd of 1874. You may differ with me and you may say it was Thomas Edison. No, what Thomas Edison did was he bought the patent from Matthew Evans and Henry Woodward. And 6 months after he did this, the headline was, Edison invents light bulb. Fake news, people, fake news. Edison didn't invent a light bulb, he bought a light bulb from two Canadians. All right, let's try this pop quiz again. I'll give you another chance. Can any of you name either of these two very accomplished Canadian inventors? And they obviously highlight our great diversity in this country and in my book. Anybody? Oh, class. Let me introduce you to Elijah McCoy and Elsie McGill. Now, Elsie McGill was the very first woman to get a bachelor's of electrical engineering in Canada. And she was diagnosed with polio before she finished the degree. She went on to get her master's in aeronautical engineering, and then the very first woman to get a PhD from MIT. Pretty inspiring, considering the doctors told her she wouldn't walk. She actually walked across that stage to get her 3 degrees herself under her own power with her cane she designed herself. She was the only person in history to single-handedly design an airplane, and there it is, the Maple Leaf 2. This woman wasn't disabled, she was inspiring. And I think a very good inspiration for our young female students to go into the STEM careers of science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, Elijah McCoy, the son of black slaves who escaped to Canada on the Underground Railroad, he actually invented the automatic oil lubricator for locomotives after he was an oil man on the trains for a while. The train engineers, after the other companies started making cheap knockoffs, well, the train engineers insisted they wanted the real McCoy for their engines, and hence that's where that phrase comes from. Let me introduce you some Atlantic Canadian inventors. Abraham Pineo Gessner, he didn't do much. He invented something called kerosene A, B, and C, and as well started this museum. Kerosene A is actually what we use in kerosene lamps. It replaced whale oil. So this guy was saving the whales and going green back in 1850. Kerosene C is what you and I call gasoline. So without him, Otto Benz and Henry Ford, they weren't going anywhere. Whoops. The other fellow up there on the right, Robert Fuller, St. John's, New Brunswick. Yes, he invented the steam foghorn, the very first one installed right here in St. John's Harbor, Partridge Island. And let me tell you about Walter Harris Carew from Parsboro, Nova Scotia. He was maimed in World War I. He was a blind quadriplegic lying helpless in a veteran's hospital bed. And so what he decided to do, his mission in life, was to make the lives of the other wounded veterans better. He gets a couple of engineers, he puts together a board of directors and raises the money, and they design the wheelchair bus, the very first wheelchair bus, so that the other wounded vets could get out and enjoy the scenery that Walter Harris Carew couldn't see. How inspiring and selfless is that? Pretty strong. Now let me tell you about my favorite maritimer, Alexander Graham Bell. Now, Bell is known for the telephone, as you know, and I call him my favorite Canadian or Nova Scotian, but a lot of people argue he's not Canadian. Well, he was emigrated to Canada as a young man. He conceived of the telephone in Brantford, Ontario, and then he moved to Nova Scotia and lived out most of the rest of his 37 years of life, inventing many other things that nobody knows about, including the metal detector to save the life of an American president, the iron lung, and numerous other things. And there's the schematic that started it all, the original patent schematic from August of 1876. And the idea came to Bell on the banks of the Grand River behind his house here. This is his boy at home. And he was throwing pebbles into the water. 25 years later, further up that Grand River, young Reginald Fessenden comes up with the idea for radio carrier waves throwing pebbles into the same river. Two inventors in Ontario are both inspired by the same river to come up with telephone and radio, the two underlying technologies in our modern day high-speed gigabit handsets that we all carry around. And I was very inspired by that story. In fact, that was the story that made me write the book. And I called that chapter The Creators of Our Modern Age, about Bell and Fessenden, our two most important inventors. So when I did the research for my book, I actually went and met with Bell's surviving family members, toured the house, and had access to his 600 volumes of lab notes and letters, and every single gadget and prototype he made. And one of the things I found in those archives was this vinyl record that he made when he was improving on Edison's design of the gramophone. Let me take you back in time to 1885, and you are going to hear the actual real voice of Alexander Graham Bell. You can follow along with the words at the bottom of the slide. Wow. So what does the guy do after he makes millions inventing the telephone and perfecting the gramophone? Well, he moves to Nova Scotia, and he starts what's called the Aerial Experimentation Association, the AEA. And he formed this with two U of T physics grads, Frederick Casey Baldwin and Douglas McCurdy. And what were they trying to do? They were trying to perfect heavier than air craft. Yes, he actually outdoes those other famous airplane inventors by trying to make airplanes more stable and safer by inventing the ailerons, or the flaps that you see on the wings of airplanes. And that was Alexander Graham Bell's invention. And he did that because one of his AEA boys was actually killed in the very first aviation fatality crash in one of the Wright brothers' planes, trying to help them. The very first powered flight takes place outside of Bell's property in Bedeck, Nova Scotia, when they fly the actual Silver Dart. There it is, designed by Bell and his boys. And they flew 40 flights in and around and over Brador Lake up in Cape Breton.
This is only a few months after the Wright brothers did the first public demonstration of their airplane that lasted a minute and a half. February 23rd, 1909. Pretty amazing. And let me tell you now about the most prolific and important Canadian inventor that nobody knows, Reginald Aubrey Fessenden. In 1876, as a 10-year-old, Fessenden is inspired by Bell's work, and he wants to send his voice wirelessly across the sky without using those silly wires of Bell. And so he goes on to invent radio and broadcasting in December of 1900. He then goes on to come up with more than 500 other patents, including sonar, the electrical conduit, and many others. His first broadcast to multiple people was on December 23rd, 1906. Telegraph operators on the ships in the Atlantic are listening, and they hear the inventor singing Christmas carols when they're expecting the dee-deet, the dee-deet of Morse code. Let me take you back in time again to a simulation of that very first test that Fessenden did, putting a human voice on a radio wave, December 23rd, 1900. Is it any surprise that the very first words uttered on a radio wave by a Canadian, and he's asking about the weather? All right, how many James Bond fans we got in the audience? All right, so you probably know that Ian Fleming wrote the James Bond series and the movies. What you probably don't know is he was actually a real spy from World War II, and he was recruited to train at a spy training school set up by Sir William Stevenson of Winnipeg. Where was that spy training school? Just outside of Toronto. Camp X, there it is, was set up outside of Toronto to teach espionage, explosives, coded communications. It was so secret that the Prime Minister knew nothing about it. And they actually trained the very first recruits of the CIA here at Camp X in Canada. Now, when Ian Fleming was there, he stayed at the barracks, but not these barracks. He stayed at a military barracks in Toronto. And what was across the street from that military barracks? The St. James Bond United Church. I think we found the inspiration for the James Bond name. So there might be a little Canadian content in that famous British spy. And now let me tell you an inspiring story about 4 unbelievably amazing students. They came to me in 2007 in my electronics class and said, we want to do a big world's first project similar to all these Canadian inventors and all these firsts you've been telling us about in our own country. And so they came up with a truly incredible project. In fact, it was way, way out of their league and way beyond the skills that they had at the time. But we set to work for 2 solid years, working dozens and dozens of extra hours to learn the materials for me to teach them and building the equipment. And their project was literally out of this world. Were they successful? Well, let's take a look.
And up next, this. Getting through.
Checking in from Humber College. Schedule contact. Do you copy?
Some Canadian students make a phone call that redefines long distance. Well, they better get an A for this. 4 Toronto students have boldly gone where no homework has gone before. Today, they made contact with the International Space Station. In a way, their teachers are calling a first. Joanna Remiliotis has the story.
One small college.
No, actually leave it live for this point now. Don't change anything.
One giant technological leap.
T-minus 9 minutes.
4 students and a professor on a shoestring budget. And a dream that defied the skeptics, including themselves.
It's such a huge deal. Like, if talking to space was something easy to do, surely everyone would be doing it. And then, yeah, that's beautiful.
They were, after all, shooting for the stars. The first college students to design and build a radio system that would make live voice contact with an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. They had $4,000 to do it.
NASA does this all the time. They talk to space with a $100 billion budget and an entire boatload of engineers that would fill the Titanic.
Undaunted, the students worked 100-hour weeks for nearly 2 years. Then it came down to the final nerve-wracking test. They only had 10 minutes to find the ISS signal and speak to the astronaut before the space station hurtled out of range at nearly 27,000 kilometers an hour. After a few last-second technical glitches, the team sent their signal into space at about 12:29 Eastern Time today.
4, 3, 2, 1. We're live. NA1SS, this is VA3JUV, Humber College, checking in for scheduled contact. Do you copy?
First try, no response.
NA1SS, this is VA.
Then the voice from outer space. American astronaut Sandra Magnus.
I almost wet myself. I won't lie to you.
Paul J. was simply overcome.
Wow, this really worked. Because NASA, they don't give second tries. They say it works or not.
Amateur radio experts who work with NASA call it a hit.
I know the people at NASA are looking at this one and going, scratching their head going, wow, that's really something.
As for the students, they're still recovering and hoping this means finding a job when they graduate just got easier. Joanna Brumaliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
I inspired those boys with the stories that I'd been telling them for years from my book. And there's over 170 other inspiring stories of Canadian ingenuity in that book that nobody knows. So please, class, I ask you, if you can just remember one thing, that we are the second largest landmass. We are the first nation of hockey, and we invented it at Windsor, Nova Scotia at King's College. We are the best part of North America, and we are the most inventive country in the world. I'm Professor Mark Rector. I hope I've inspired you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. You definitely have me inspired. Hopefully your brain has been able to take in all the information from today. After all that learning, we are actually very excited to introduce this next TED video titled Responding to Spam Emails. Please enjoy. So I bet after that one, we're all quite excited to receive spam emails now. So we are nearing the end of our day, but we still have some prizes to give out. So Dana and I are going to do a draw for our next mug. Amit, is that? Yeah, so come on up and get your mug. All right, so to continue on, we have Kate, an award-winning marketing specialist and podcaster with experience working with celebrities, musicians, artists, and large companies. She works full-time at an ICS creative agency in St. John and runs her own business, Kate Milbury Marketing and Communications. She is also the co-founder of a music content and podcast platform called Strange Grooves. Please welcome Kate with Keeping It Real in Business, Mentorship, Life, when it's good and bad.
I'm here today to talk to you guys about life and business and all of the ups and downs through it. And I want you to know that you're not alone. So for me, I think everybody has a pillar in their lives that keep whatever they're doing, whether it being in the audience today, starting a business, a podcast, taking a break from something, deciding that something's not worth it. And I think that those pillars play a very focal point in making what we're doing today worthwhile. And for me, that's my 13-year-old dog, Herb. So from the time I was 17, I dropped out of school, and I shouldn't have done that, but we all have a journey. And Herb taught me so much in these 13 years. You know, through every decision that I make, he is a prominent factor in why I'm doing what I'm doing. From where I live, when and if I travel, the career that I do, really, he really does play a day-to-day part of my life in every decision that I make. And I'm sure you guys in the audience have, whether it be your children, your jobs, your friends, your family, you have these pillars in your life. So the thing that I'm facing right now is that I'm crippled by the fear of losing him because he's been the constant in my life that keeps me going. He's what I live for, right? He's why I have the job I have, why I travel, why I don't. So what does the future look like without him? Because as much as I like to keep going, I love to keep busy, I love to be active in my community, he's my everyday. So I find myself questioning this in my business life and in my personal life, and it's been really, really, really scary. So what I found is that life and business can be absolutely wonderful and amazing, but it can also feel extremely trivial and confusing. Hands up, who's felt that on a daily basis? Maybe weekly, maybe monthly, maybe right now. And I think what is really happening is that through all of these moments and experiences, through all the ups and downs in our lives, these things are happening at such breakneck speeds that it's causing a culture of stress and uncertainty. We never know what to do next, if we're doing enough, if we deserve taking a bath with some candles, like we've heard some of the other speakers reflect to self-care. It is extremely important. For me, at this point in my life, I just want to slow down, to be quite honest with you. Everything is so fast all the time, from the way we consume content, the way we're learning new languages, from meeting new people. I've realized finally, turning 30 this year, that I can't control everything. And that was a little bit of a scary notion for me, because as a control freak, I didn't understand that. And I didn't realize that there are things that will be thrown at you that you cannot proactively navigate your way through. And it's not always going to be comfortable and easy. But that's why I'm here today, okay? To just keep going. This is what life is. So through it all, through all of these successes and triumphs, and through the tragedies, like I said, that are happening some days on the very same day, I want you to know that it is important to keep going, okay? And when we think about the bigger picture of things in our life, okay, we sometimes say that life is short, but I think it can be long. It's how we kind of bring in those moments to our lives that actually give us a moment to think about what we're doing. And for me, Herb's getting older, work is only getting busier. As you've heard, I've got a number of things that I do just here in the community. And I just find, although my life is fulfilling, it's passing by extremely fast. My dad once told me that, Kate, you might be 16 now, but you'll be 21 before you think about it, and then 30, and then 40. And I thought, yeah, but there'll be lots of time in between there. Stop wishing my life away. But he was right. Those days do become a lot shorter, and your time for self-care, your friends and family, become back burner things of your life. And I get caught sometimes not having a moment to even think about the day. I just think about, what fire do I have to put out next? What piece of content should I be writing? Who can I be helping? It's always what's next, what's next. And I'll be honest, it's exhausting, and things do inevitably get missed. There's always somebody or something I could be giving my time to in a more quality manner. Who's felt that in their day-to-day jobs? You know, you go and you do your very best, and sometimes you feel like you didn't even do the bare minimum. But to me, this is both life and business, okay? Our output mentally, physically, and even just emotionally is compromised. We can't be 100% all the time, and I don't think it's healthy to be. You know, I think that when we're thinking about what does our future look like, we really have to think about embracing our day-to-day, okay? They're not always gonna be up here. They're not always gonna be down here. They might kind of have a flow to them. For me, I think we self-sabotage these moments by thinking so much all the time. Who's an overthinker here? I certainly am. I'm thinking while doing this talk. So I think we self-sabotage sometimes because we're always wondering. You know, the highs and lows of life, I'm gonna be honest, and I'm sure you already know this, you cannot control, okay? There's not one single entity in this world that you can full and 100% wholeheartedly control, okay? And that's okay. But what you have to get kind of to the understanding of is knowing that you have to live life at your own pace, and that if you could experience these moments a little bit, whether it's being super busy at work, having to run to get the kids places, dealing with your ill dog, whatever those things are, if you can be just in that moment for a little bit longer, those moments are going to shape your lives, okay? And this has been hard in marketing and advertising and social media and influencer marketing. It has been exhausting because the question I deal with all the time is what's next? What can we write next? What photos can we do? How do we tell more captivating stories to help others? And although it's been extremely rewarding, I'm always either on a very high or a really low. I never know if what I'm doing is good enough. Anybody feel that way sometimes? So my real example today is that back in March when I went and did this TED Talk, it was one of the most meaningful things I'd ever wanted in my life, and it still is. But over the past 6 months, I decided to go to therapy, and that really changed my outlook on this talk today. And the reason being is I originally wanted to just come talk to you about life and business and marketing, but I was going to leave out all the reality of that and life. And I thought that would really do an injustice to all of you here and myself for wanting to put this talk on. Because to me, even the greatest things that we can get in our lives, they're never attained in a comfortable manner, usually. They're not usually easy. And I found myself, even about this talk, asking, why did I get myself into this? And I also found myself asking, how did I not want this more? Right? And as a business and podcasting with your friends, with your family, sometimes you think, how am I going to get through this? How is it feeling this intense in this moment? And sometimes a few minutes can go by and we're okay. And sometimes it takes weeks for us to get out of bed. But that doesn't change what our ethic is. That doesn't change who we are. It's a moment, and we should be conscientious of owning that. So if I could remind you of anything today, regardless of what you're doing in your life, be ambitious about it. I'm not saying you have to go do a million things to be ambitious about your life, but be ambitious about your ideas of what you want in your life, because that is a game changer. That's something I found in therapy in the past 6 months, is do more of what you love. And if you say, Kate, what does that even mean? Well, an example of that would be if you're someone who likes to write, but you don't write anymore because you're not a writer or a poet, get to writing again. Paint, go out and do things. Just because you're not a photographer doesn't mean you shouldn't be out taking pictures and doing things in life. That's what gives us our individuality. So in that, in learning kind of who we are, how we're comfortable in our jobs, our lives, in the community, we can't always steer our own vessels, right? And we can't always know every proactive hurdle or decision that's going to be made with us, for us, or even without our knowledge, okay? But that's okay. And I think if we take ownership of everything that's happening in that moment, good or bad, I think we'll come out at least feeling proud of the legacy we've made when we're ending life. And I look back at the past 10 years of my career, and guys, it has not been easy. It has been grueling. It has been amazing, and it has been disheartening, and I've wondered, what am I doing this for? And how could I not be doing more of this? I need a whole team of people to help me do more of what I'm doing today. And I just want to share a few things with you, real common observances that I've kind of noticed and talked with people over the past 10 years, and really that there's always going to be three factors. Okay? So whether you're starting a new education, coming to a new city in the world for the first time, having a child, making a family, whatever it is that you're doing in your life, there are going to be elements that you're not going to know. You can read every book, listen to every podcast, go to every life coach, and be so prepared, but there will be elements that you won't know. Okay? You're going to have to try, regardless, and really, really push through those, I would say, things that are in your way, but also opportunities that you need to embrace so that you can actually just keep it real regardless of the outcome. So maybe it was that job that you knew that you were suited for, that you nailed the interview on, that you feel you deserve, and that your skill set is the golden goose for this company, but you don't get the job. Do you get mad at the company? Maybe. But I think if you keep it real throughout it, you'll realize that part of your life story is actually that happening. And that's been my experience over the past 10 years. I've worked incredibly hard at everything I've done, and it seems sometimes that failure is what I'll be successful at. But as I look through and as I prepared for this talk, mentors are who shape our lives, okay? So my podcast partner, my other mentors in life, the people I work with, my friends, my family, the people in my relationships, all play a focal point in why I'm up here today. They play a focal point in the next 10 years of my life because those people, they might have started out as acquaintances, became friends, and now are my family. They're the people that I have their backs when they need me. And regardless of what's happening in my life, whether I'm laid off or whether something really awful happens with my family or my herb, anything like that, I know the community will have my back. And to me, I really found that out when I started understanding what startup life was here in New Brunswick. And as we've heard today, St. John in New Brunswick is an incredible place and an incredible ecosystem that people really, really, really work to elevate one another. And for me, at 20, 10 years ago, I was fresh out of school with hefty loans, and all I wanted to do was work. And there's this thing called experience that you need, right? And that's the common, oh, you never have enough experience, but it's like, I'm here and I'm trying. But you gotta keep it real throughout that and just keep going, right? So I ended up working for a large corporation for about 4 years, and I thought I was gonna get the gold watch and be there for 30 years in my life. That's just what it would be, and I was okay with that. But I got laid off. Didn't know that was coming. Does that happen to anybody? Right? And as I started going through this, I was like, what am I going to do? I don't have any savings. Oh my goodness, my livelihood. Herb. I didn't look for any prospects. What am I going to do? My community had my back. And I'll tell you, sometimes when these hurdles are happening, you wonder, I can't go back and do that, or somebody's going to see that on Instagram and I'm going to look like an idiot. That's okay. That you should do that. I would actually encourage that. You are the only person who makes the narrative of your story. Other people have ways of putting narratives in there for you, but you are the one responsible for that. And by meeting Monica and Brent and Greg and all the folks during this time, I was able to work with some of the best people in North America in robotics, engineering, manufacturing. I was able to travel again. I got confidence. I was terrified. And I'll tell you, those people believed in me when I didn't, and I needed them to, and I had no idea at the time. And through all of that, through getting up on stage in front of hundreds of investors and asking them for money, that brought change because that company was acquired and I didn't see it coming. I'd worked so hard to show the success of the company, to put out our value proposition, and our plan was right there. And I wasn't out looking for new prospects. What was I going to do, right? But I'll tell you, the community had my back. Okay, all of those people I worked with, the people I worked with in the community, all the relationships with all the media, people I had worked with got me to the next step. That's where I'm at today. That's why I've been able to start a business. That's why I've been able to start a podcast. If it was not for my mentors, I would not be up here today, okay? And I want you just to think real quick in the back of your head while I'm speaking, somebody that's impacting or has impacted your life, okay? The impact that your support system brings to you, and especially the one here in St. John, is second to none. I've traveled all over North America at this point, and I can tell you that we are very unique here. We have a very unique and very, very, very important ecosystem here. And it's important, that each person that's coming here today really puts that back out into the St. John community, because we are creating something really incredible here. And for me, elevating others is my strong suit. That's what I like to do. I like to tell other people's stories. I like to get real with them, and I like them to know exactly what their message is so that they can do more of that, okay? Now, you can't always navigate or know every decision. We know this, right? Hurdles will be thrown. But if we can know that nobody has it figured out, regardless if it's the Gary V's of the world or Oprah or whoever it is, it's okay. Not everybody has every part of their lives completely navigated out. But I'll tell you that standing still is not enough. Like me, you have to just keep moving, okay? And it's like I said, it's not always going to be easy, but ideas are extremely impactful, okay? And when they're communicated to people, they're not only just communicated, they're then actioned, created, and put into a process for people to adopt and then make change. So although I may not be able to change the world, maybe my ideas today could help change my own and maybe help navigate yours a bit easier. And at the end of this, I really didn't know if I could do this talk today. But I remembered those three things of not knowing. I didn't know how this was going to end up. I didn't know if the lights would be too hot. I'm trying, and I'm going to keep it real with all of you throughout the talk, okay? That was my mandate here today. I want you to know that you make a huge difference, okay? In your own life, if you don't feel it right now, it's okay. But you do make a difference, and you make a difference in the lives of others. You make a difference in this community and in other businesses, okay? The people that you do day-to-day business with, even though you might think it's your mundane day, you create impact for them, okay? I want you to remind yourselves that during the best and the worst times of your lives, because they'll be there. And like I said, sometimes during the same day. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And finally, our last speaker of the day. Isn't it crazy how fast the afternoon has gone? We are very pleased to welcome this next speaker, traveling all the way from Alberta. She is a high-performance equestrian athlete, blogger, and author working towards creating a more socially talked about space for people suffering chronic pain. Please welcome Kat Node with Chronic Pain, from survival to support.
Whew, okay, hardest part's over. I was really scared about walking down here in my heels, but we made it. Here's hoping for the way out. So, I'm here to talk to you guys today about pain. Now, when I say pain, most of your brains probably automatically go to some sort of physical ailment, whether it be a broken arm with a cast or a sprained ankle with one of those walking boots, but something you can see. Pain is so much easier for us to understand when we can see it. But pain's actually so much more than that. Pain, whether it comes from the mental side via anxiety, depression, loss, bullying, or the physical side from an injury or chronic pain, chronic illness, or chronic fatigue, how we arrive with these ailments might be completely different. but the journey that we take through them is actually really similar. My journey with chronic pain began August 9th, 2015, the day of my 25th birthday. I'm a professional horseback rider by trade and have dreamt since 6 years old of going to the Olympics and representing my country. The sport I do is called 3-day eventing. It's comprised of 3 equestrian disciplines over 3 days. The first phase is called dressage. It's like dancing on horses. The second phase is called show jumping. It's going over the big jumps with the rails that fall down, like you see on TV. The third phase, however, is called cross country. It's fast, adrenaline pumping, but it's also really dangerous. It's going hell-bent for leather over jumps that if you hit them, you fall down, not the jump. I headed down to a big competition in the United States and was actually leading the highest level of competition at that show with points to spare heading into cross country. Now, getting to go cross country, because it's so fun, on your birthday feels a little bit like a dream come true. But getting to go cross country on your birthday in first place, nothing was going to break my stride. Or so I thought. Our course started out amazing. It flew by in perfect jumps until disaster struck at the last fence. My large horse, Jackson, put a tiny misjudged step into the base of the jump, and we had a rotational fall. We hit the fence and did a somersault together in the air, and my 1,200-pound horse landed on me on the other side, and we skid 10 feet with me underneath him. Doesn't sound like it went well from here, does it? My poor mom's in the back. She, I think, got some gray hairs that day. It's all my fault. I was helicoptered to the hospital in Seattle, where I was diagnosed with 3 fractured vertebrae in my back, my L2, 3, and 4. A few days later, and a lot of pain meds, I was finally sprung from what felt like my own personal jail. I was eager to get home and get back to competing, knowing that Olympic qualifiers were just around the corner. I knew that if I could get back to riding right away, I wouldn't miss a beat. I was told a couple months off, and I would be good as new. When I first got back on, I felt like my spine was collapsing. I was nauseous with pain. So I started to look elsewhere for some healing methods, and that's what landed me in chiropractic. Through chiro and new patient x-rays, I learned that not only is your L2, 3, and 4 in the middle of your back, if you ask me anything about horse anatomy, I can help you, but I know nothing about people anatomy. My pain had always been low down, so that surprised me. We also learned through the x-rays that we'd missed a few things. I was also diagnosed with a fractured pelvis, a crushed SI joint, and a dislocated pelvis. No wonder I was still in so much pain. He sent me with these x-rays to my doctors to get a confirmation, and he confirmed. My healing period got extended, and I was heartbroken. I knew that this length of time would put me out of any shot of making the 2016 Olympics. Oops, sorry, wrong block. So, taking all this healing time, I figured that I would be progressively getting better. But the opposite seemed to be true. Every day, the pain was a little bit worse. Every week, I seemed to limp a little bit more, and every month, the pain got harder and harder to bear. Finally, when my left foot started to go completely numb and I couldn't feel it, I realized something more was going on. And normal people would have been like, yeah, get in the doctors right away, but I put it off. Because I felt like if I was in my doctors anymore, I was going to need like frequent flyer miles or like my own personal room dedicated to me there. But when my foot started to go blue and I actually lost the ability to flex my toes or weight bear on it, I realized I couldn't put it off anymore. So I limped my way into my doctor, and he was completely panicked. He thought that the wings that had also broken off my vertebrae, called the transverse processes, were now interfering with my spinal cord, and I was actually risking paralysis. He wrote me a requisition and sent me to the Spinal Specialty Hospital in Vancouver. I drove down there terrified. I figured with this kind of looming diagnosis, at least I would get amazing care. But the opposite seemed to be true. I sat for 4 hours waiting, 4 hours nervous that every shift in my chair, every time I sneezed or had to get up to go to the bathroom, that I could paralyze myself. So when they finally called my name, I so eagerly limped my way into the exam room and handed the doctor my requisition form. But he put it down. He didn't read it. That doctor didn't examine me or ask me a single question about my body or my pain. He didn't send me for a single test. He looked at me and he said, "What drugs do you want?" Now, I'm not a big believer in taking prescription medicine for pain, especially chronic pain, unless you absolutely have to, because it's a really slippery slope. We always need the pain, but then what happens is our brain starts to manifest pain to feed the drug dependency. And then how do you tell where the pain starts and stops and the need to fill the drugs actually begins, well, I never wanted to find that out. So that's why I was more than a little surprised that that's all he was offering. I said, no, I need help, not drugs. And that doctor looked at me. That doctor I'd waited 4 hours to see looked at me and said, well, I'm busy, so you can take the drugs or you can leave. So I left. That's a day I will never forget. That's the day for me that hope died. So many doctors before had told me my injuries were permanent and that my suffering would last the rest of my life, but I'd refused to believe it until that moment. That doctor, with his lack of care, ripped all the last hope I had. Things got really dark. I started to miss work. I started to withdraw from my friends and family. Even getting out of bed each morning became harder. It had always hurt to get out of bed before, but I had something to get out of bed for, but not anymore. My rock bottom came on a Wednesday morning. I'd had a fight with somebody, and I was out of spoons. And now, if you've never heard of the spoon theory, it's by a woman named Christine Miserandino, and she describes living in chronic pain as waking up every day with a certain number of spoons, and you give 1 spoon per activity. So, for example, if you wake up with 10 spoons, 10 spoons, 10 activities, that's pretty good. Except what people who don't suffer in pain don't realize is it actually takes a spoon for the smallest activities. Getting up and getting dressed, that's a spoon. Feeding yourself breakfast, that's a spoon. Feeding your pets or your kids, that's another spoon. God forbid you have to take a shower, that's for sure a spoon. And now you're halfway through your spoons for the day and you haven't even left. Well, that day I was out of spoons when someone unloaded their day on me. And when you're in chronic pain, your threshold to take any exterior things are so low that it hit me like a ton of bricks. I sat on my bathroom floor where I had fallen because my pelvis dislocated yet again, as it was doing so often. I sat there on the floor for hours, crying, holding a bottle of painkillers, and deciding it was time to end my life. I knew that it was too hard to bear, and I couldn't keep going on like this. Because when you're 25 and living at a 10 out of 10 in pain every single day, and your injuries are permanent, and you have more days ahead of you than behind you, that's a pretty sad existence. How do you justify going on like that? Well, I couldn't anymore. I sat on that floor for hours, thinking about all the things that I was going to miss, all the people I would never see again, and what I'd be leaving behind for them in pain. I was just about to take that first step into ending my life when I got hit with a wave of all the skills that I learned from horseback riding. And now I don't mean the physical skills of riding, but I mean the strong, fight-back attitude that it takes to be a professional athlete. They hit me, and I got up. I physically pulled myself to a stand. Tony Robbins describes changing your mood in 2 ways, by changing your focus and changing your physiology. And that's just what I did that day. I did it before there were even tools I knew I had. I changed my focus by getting up, crawling up the counter, and I looked myself in the mirror and I yelled, "Enough!" And I literally yelled. And it was a battle cry that I needed for myself to change from the victim who was losing her battle to chronic pain to the fighter who was going to get up every time and fight for her life. You know that song, I get knocked down, but I get up again? Well, that's just what I was going to do every time. I was raised to be a strong, independent person who was not going to let anybody tell her what her life was going to look like, not let anybody tell her what her healing was going to look like. Nobody could decide that I wasn't going to get better except for me. And that was enough. I'd had enough of the pity party. I changed my physiology by moving. I decided in that moment I was going to commit to 5 minutes a day of walking. 5 minutes every day. And those 5 minutes felt like agony. That 5 minutes felt at the time like the equivalency of running a marathon. And then the strangest thing happened. Every day, that 5 minutes started to get a little bit longer, and then a little bit faster. And then that thing that was torturing me every day became the thing that I was living for every day. And that's when I realized, if all you have in your day is pain, that's a pretty sad existence. As soon as I brought even the smallest amount of things into my day that brought me joy, life began worth living again. Now, all of this physical healing did so much towards my progress, but there was still a huge part left to go, and that was the emotional side of healing. I needed to accept that I'd put 20 years into a goal that I just was never going to have, and that was okay. I needed to forgive my body for not being able to come back from this. I needed to realize that just because I spent those 20 years chasing something I couldn't have didn't mean that those years were a waste. Those years made me a passionate person. They made me goal-driven and the type of person who's going to chase down what she wants for her life. Soon as I started to accept these and understand that this was a part of my healing and I had to let that go, my healing took off. Now, that's not to say that I'm not in pain. Standing here right now, especially in these heels, I'm at a 7 out of 10 in pain. I'm at pain every day, at least a 6 out of 10. But that same pain that used to hold me back from my dreams now inspired me. It inspired me to start a blog. Because in those moments, I felt like the only person in the world suffering. I felt so alone, but that just wasn't true. I was never alone. I made myself feel alone. When I put my first blog post out, I had 500 responses within 48 hours. Half were people who had no idea that I had suffered, and I really never felt like I suffered silently. The other half, which was even more amazing, were people who shared their pain stories with me, and people who I had no idea were suffering. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I isolated myself. And I think so many of us do that in chronic pain because we're ashamed that maybe we're not as strong physically or mentally as we thought we are. But to be honest, I think that's garbage. I think if you get up every day in pain, whether it's physical or mental, and you go to work and you play with your kids and you see your friends and you chase down your goals, all while in pain, that makes you even stronger. But just because we can fight through it alone doesn't mean that we should. Do you remember that hashtag #MeToo movement where all those brave people came forward and shared their horrible experiences? But it gave permission to people who are suffering silently to do the same. Well, that's what I want for chronic pain. I want #PainToo, a community of people suffering together. Because a million days in pain together is easier than one day apart. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat. And just like that, we have come to an end of our program. Dana and I are actually going to do a draw for our last prize of the quarter zip up and a new mug. So is there a Glenn Hicks here?
Wow, I just can't believe how fast today has gone. I hope you have all enjoyed it. I just have a few quick thank yous because this day would not have gone nearly as well without the many moving parts and people that have taken the time to help me out. Of course, our sponsors, thank you CBC for that awesome sizzle reel and all the work that you've put into today. It's truly appreciated, and all of these sponsors on here today would not have happened without them. To our speakers, thank you so, so much. Another round of applause for them. They were phenomenal. And to all of you, thank you so much for purchasing your ticket and coming out to support them. And I really hope that you've taken away, if not one thing, many things from today and what these speakers have had to share with you. To my team, thank you so much for all of your help. There's so many people who have taken lots of time and really put this on without a hitch. So thank you all so much. And on a final note, who is hungry? Well, I will be at the St. John Ale House from 6 to 8, and I hope you all will join us with our speakers there. It's a great chance to network, to talk about what you've heard today, and to speak about opportunities for improving our city. So thank you so much for coming out, and I hope to see you there.